She arrived quietly, her eyes lowered, dressed in a plain black uniform. Most guests didn't even glance her way. To them, she was just another server at the extravagant wedding of the year, moving between white tablecloths and champagne towers, making sure the guests had everything they needed. But what no one knew was that the woman they were ignoring, even mocking under their breath, wasn't just a hired helper. She was the wife of one of the wealthiest men in the country. And he was there too, watching everything from a distance. Her name was Lila. She had once been the center of attention herself, warm, humble, and loved by everyone in her small hometown. But marrying into wealth had come with more challenges than she ever imagined. Over time, whispers of jealousy, old family feuds, and hidden agendas began to twist her world into something unrecognizable. At this wedding, those whispers had turned into open humiliation. The bride's mother, who had always looked down on Lila, had arranged for her to help out, knowing full well who she really was. It was a public dig, one meant to shame her. And Lila, graceful as ever, said nothing. She simply showed up, rolled up her sleeves, and served the very people who used to call her unworthy. They thought they'd broken her spirit. They thought she was alone. But what they didn't see was the man in the dark suit near the back, staying out of the spotlight. Lila's husband, Ethan, billionaire businessman rarely seen in public, stood quietly, his eyes fixed on her. Not one person had recognized him. He wasn't there to make a scene. He was there to see something for himself. And as he watched, the people who had smiled to his face treat his wife like she didn't matter. Something in him shifted. The music swelled, laughter filled the air, and no one noticed the tension building behind Ethan's calm expression. But things were about to change. Because this wasn't just another wedding. This was the moment he realized the truth. And what came next would leave everyone speechless. So what did Ethan do when he finally stepped forward? And how did Lila's quiet strength lead to a revelation no one expected? You'll want to stick around for what happens next. Ethan hadn't planned to come to the wedding. In fact, he usually avoided gatherings like this. Too much noise, too many fake smiles. But when Lila told him what was being asked of her, something didn't sit right. She hadn't complained, not once. She just smiled and said, "It's only one evening. I can handle it." That was who Lila was. Quiet, kind, never looking for trouble. But Ethan knew better. He knew when something wasn't fair. And this wasn't fair. The wedding was for the daughter of one of Ethan's former business partners, a man who had smiled through deals and handshakes, but had always treated Lila like she was less than. The same man who had once asked Ethan, half joking, "Don't you think you married a little below your level?" Ethan had never forgotten that. And now here they were, years later, using this grand event to remind Lila where they thought she belonged, at the bottom. Lila had grown up far from this world of diamonds and designer gowns. She was raised by her grandmother in a small town, where love was measured by actions, not money. She worked hard for everything she had, even before marrying Ethan. She met him by accident, in the most ordinary way, at a coffee shop when she spilled her drink on his shirt and tried desperately to clean it with napkins. He didn't care about the mess. He cared about her eyes, her laugh, her way of making everyone around her feel seen. That's what made this night so painful. These people didn't see her at all. Ethan stood near the entrance to the garden, where strings of lights wrapped around tall trees. He watched as servers passed by him without a second glance. No one recognized him without the usual media glare, and he liked it that way. It let him watch without being watched. But now he was watching something that made his chest tighten. Lila was serving cake. Someone had just snapped their fingers at her. A guest made a joke loud enough for others to hear, something about her being too pretty for this kind of work. They laughed. Lila didn't. She kept moving, head high, but Ethan saw the slight tremble in her hands. He was waiting. Not to rescue her, Lila didn't need rescuing, but to decide how much longer he'd stay silent, because the moment he spoke, everything would change. And some truths, once revealed, couldn't be taken back. From across the garden, Ethan wasn't the only one watching. Among the glittering crowd, seated near the front, was Helena, Ethan's sister. Unlike most of the guests, she recognized Lila right away. She also recognized the setup. Helena had never been a fan of the social games played by their family's old circles. She knew the way people like the bride's mother worked, sweet smiles on the surface, sharp intentions underneath. Helena hadn't said anything yet, but her eyes followed Lila every time she moved, her jaw tight with silent anger. Back in the tent, the real pressure was mounting. The bride, Serena, had just thrown a quiet tantrum over a misplaced flower arrangement. Somehow, it became Lila's problem. "You've already cleaned up enough messes tonight," one of the bridesmaids said with a smirk, handing Lila a soiled napkin. "Here's another." Lila said nothing. She simply took it, nodded, and walked away. But even that calm, graceful act seemed to irritate them more. The more she stayed composed, the more they tried to break her. What they didn't know was that Lila had been through worse. Years before, long before she became Mrs. Ethan Hale, she had worked 3 jobs at once to pay for her grandmother's hospital bills. She'd slept on buses, skipped meals, and faced rejection after rejection. Humiliation wasn't new to her. But back then, there was no one watching. Now, someone was. Inside the kitchen tent, whispers started to spread among the staff. One of the younger waiters had overheard 2 guests talking. Something about the billionaire's wife playing housemaid. He didn't understand it, but it sounded off. Another server nodded, quietly adding, "She doesn't act like us. She's too calm." It didn't take long before rumors began threading through the staff, half in disbelief, half in awe. Outside, Ethan checked his phone. A message from his assistant blinked on the screen. "Are you sure you want to be here? The press is poking around again." He didn't reply. Not yet. Helena stood slowly, as if about to say something, but stopped herself. Her husband, Mark, leaned in and whispered, "Don't get involved. It's not our fight." But Helena shook her head. "It is our fight. They just don't know it yet." The music swelled again. Glasses clinked. And as the bride took to the dance floor, all eyes were on her, except for the ones still watching Lila, and the quiet storm that was just beginning to stir. The night was reaching its peak. The music grew louder, the laughter sharper, the champagne flowing freely. But beneath the glitter and gold, tension hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. Lila had just finished clearing a row of dessert plates when she heard her name, too loud to be accidental. "Lila? Oh my God, is that really you?" It was Cassandra, Serena's cousin, loud, dramatic, and always a step too close. She wasn't smiling with kindness. No, this smile was the kind that cut deep. Everyone nearby turned. Cassandra's voice carried, "You're serving here? Wow, I thought you married rich. Guess that didn't work out, huh?" The words hit like a slap, but Lila didn't flinch. She just met Cassandra's eyes and said calmly, "Just helping out." That answer didn't satisfy Cassandra, or the crowd. Whispers started again, this time louder, bolder. Phones came out. Photos were taken. It wasn't long before people began piecing things together. Someone pulled up a tabloid article with Lila and Ethan on the cover from last year. The same woman who had just been humiliated was now being recognized for who she truly was. Confusion rippled through the crowd. At the back of the garden, Ethan took a slow step forward. He had remained still long enough. His jaw was set, hands clenched, but his eyes stayed on Lila, measuring her strength, the weight of her silence. He wasn't angry that they didn't recognize him, He was angry they didn't respect her. Helena moved through the crowd too, weaving between guests who were now whispering frantically. She was on edge, one eye on Lila, the other on Ethan. "He's going to lose it," she muttered under her breath. Mark followed a step behind, unsure whether to stop her or stay out of it. Then came the moment that broke the last thread of quiet. Serena, in her ivory gown, turned to the crowd and laughed. "Honestly, if I had known we'd get live entertainment from the Billionaire's housemaid, I would have put her on the invite list." The guests gasped and then fell into an uneasy hush. Lila froze. Her hands, still holding a tray, didn't move. Ethan heard every word, and that was it. He stepped into the light. All eyes turned toward him, and the crowd began to shift. Some recognized him now. Others stood frozen, confused. And Lila, still calm, still standing, finally looked up and met his gaze. But what he would say next? No one could have guessed. The air went still as Ethan stepped forward, every inch of him composed, yet dangerous in his silence. He didn't say a word at first. He didn't need to. The ripple of recognition spread fast. Guests exchanged looks, mouths slightly open, suddenly aware of who had been watching them all night. The bride's smirk faded. Cassandra stepped back. Phones were lowered. Then Ethan finally spoke, but not to the crowd. He looked straight at Lila and said, "Are you okay?" Just those 3 words, spoken softly, but they sliced through the tension like glass. Lila gave the smallest nod, and Ethan turned to Serena and her parents. "Interesting kind of hospitality," he said, calm but firm. "You ask my wife to serve your guests while pretending she's someone else. And you thought I wouldn't notice." The silence was thick, until another voice cut through it, sharp and unexpected. "I told them not to do it," said a woman from the side. It was Ava, the wedding planner, who had been in charge of the entire event. She looked nervous, but her voice was steady. "They made me put her on the service team. I didn't want to, but I was told she needed to be put in her place." That's what Serena's mother said. Gasps broke out. Lila's eyes widened. The betrayal ran deeper than she realized. Ethan's jaw clenched. His gaze shifted to the bride's mother, who looked pale but defiant. "This is a private event," she said. "You're making a scene." Ethan stepped closer, slow and deliberate. "You made the scene. I'm just standing in it." But just as the weight of the moment peaked, another twist landed like a thunderclap. Helena, who had stayed silent for far too long, raised her voice. "You think this is just about disrespect? It's worse than that. You used Lila to distract from your daughter's real problem." All heads turned. Even Ethan looked stunned. Helena continued, holding up her phone. "Your family's business is collapsing. You planned this wedding as a cover, so no one would notice the bankruptcy filing you made yesterday morning." Now the tension snapped wide open. The crowd erupted into murmurs. Faces turned red. A few people quietly began to leave. But Lila just stood there, holding that empty tray, watching the web of lies unravel in front of her. And still, no one knew what Ethan was about to do next. The crowd stood frozen, torn between curiosity and discomfort as Helena's words echoed through the garden. Serena's mother, flushed with panic, tried to speak, but nothing came out. The carefully built illusion of wealth and power was crumbling right in front of their guests, and the one woman they tried to humiliate was still standing, calm and unshaken. Ethan stepped forward once more, his voice low but firm. "You tried to disgrace my wife for your own gain. You dragged her into your mess and underestimated her, like everyone else in this room who judged her without knowing who she is." He turned slightly, scanning the guests. "But she never needed me to defend her. She's stronger than any of you ever gave her credit for." A few claps broke out quietly in the back. Then more followed. The guests weren't just reacting to Ethan. They were reacting to Lila. She stood tall, still holding that tray, eyes steady, not once asking for pity. She hadn't fought back with words, but her grace had spoken louder than anything. Just when it felt like the truth had settled and justice had been served, Lila finally set the tray down and walked to Ethan's side. But she didn't take his hand. Instead, she turned to Helena. "Thank you," she said quietly. "But there's more." The crowd tensed again. Lila pulled a folded paper from her pocket, slightly worn from being held all night. She handed it to Ethan. He read it quickly, then looked at her, surprised. "You didn't tell me." Lila nodded. "I wanted to wait. Today felt like the right time." He turned to the crowd, holding up the paper. "My wife has just purchased a controlling share of Hartwell Holdings, the very company Serena's family is losing. It's hers now." A collective gasp swept through the guests. Serena's mother stumbled backward into her seat. Serena looked like she'd forgotten how to breathe. Even Helena stared, speechless. "I didn't do it to hurt anyone," Lila said. "I did it to protect the people who work for that company, the ones who don't have the luxury of hiding behind weddings and champagne." That moment, quiet, powerful, marked the true climax. Not just revenge, but redemption. And just when everyone thought the story was over, Lila turned to Ethan and whispered, "There's one more thing. I'm pregnant." The crowd didn't cheer. They simply stood, stunned, because no one, not a single soul there, had seen any of it coming. For a long moment, no one said anything. The garden, once buzzing with chatter and clinking glasses, had gone completely quiet. All eyes were on Lila, this simple woman who had come to serve and ended up owning the room. She wasn't just the wife of a billionaire, she was a woman who rose above humiliation, who held her strength in silence, and who made choices not out of anger, but with purpose. Ethan looked at her, awe written across his face. "You've been fighting battles I didn't even see," he said softly. She gave a small smile. "You always believed in me. I just needed to believe in myself." Behind them, Serena and her mother quietly left the dance floor, no longer the center of attention. There was no applause, no farewell. Just silence. The guests, unsure of what to say, slowly returned to their tables, some in quiet reflection, others still processing what had just unfolded. Helena gave Lila a nod of deep respect before walking away with Mark, who had nothing left to argue. The wedding continued, but it no longer belonged to the bride. The spotlight had shifted, without intention, without force. Lila hadn't taken anything. She simply showed up and stayed true to herself, and that was enough to shift the balance of everything. By the time the evening ended, word had spread. Not just about who she was, but how she had carried herself. Her name would be on more than just gossip sites. Now she'd be seen as a quiet force in the business world, a woman of influence, grace, and strength. As they walked back to the car, hand in hand, Ethan turned to her. "You know, I thought I was the one protecting you," he said with a grin. "Turns out you were always 10 steps ahead." Lila laughed, soft and real. "Maybe. Or maybe we just needed tonight to remind everyone that real power doesn't have to shout." And with that, they left behind the glittering lights, the shocked whispers, and the broken masks. Ahead of them was something much more valuable, a fresh start, a growing family, and a story no one would ever forget. Because, in the end, the woman they tried to break walked away with her head high, her dignity intact, and a future entirely her own.